In this last setup video, we're going to cover a more complex situation, okay? What I want to do is show you just a couple other tips and tricks when you're dealing with full reconstructions. One is stuff to do clinically. So obviously you're going to get your intraoral scan. You should get photos, but when the patient is with you, you need to make some decisions on if the midline's right, if the incisal edge position needs to change, how's the occlusal plane looking, and making decisions off of where the teeth are supposed to be. Is the vertical right? All those kinds of things. Now, I am going to show you in this video how to change the vertical, but I will say that normally what I do is I choose my vertical initially, and then I put like a leaf gauge in the mouth at the vertical I think I want, and that's what I scan it at. So it's scanned in at the vertical I think I want. If I need to change it from there, that's fine, but at least I'm not starting from a closed position and then opening it to where I want. I'm starting where I want and maybe just moving it a little bit from there. This right here, so what we did on this patient is we scanned their teeth with this intraoral scan, but we also then scanned again after we had placed some composite on the patient's teeth to decide where we thought it would look best, okay? And that's what this right here is. So we added some composite until we were happy with it. You can see we've even flattened it off right here. But this is what we were able to put in clinically to say, yeah, that looks good with the length right there. Now, if you look at this tooth, that's going to be a very square tooth. And so, and if you look at the gingival margins coming along and then they drop to here and then back up to here, it's pretty obvious that not only do we want to lengthen these teeth, but we also want to crown lengthen them, which is a good thing because look how short these teeth are. They're not going to be enough to support a prep like this. But if we crown lengthen and extend the incisal edge position, will be pretty good. One thing though that I'll note is we have double the information here, more information than we need. So what I would do is choose your select tool and come right through here, okay? That's really all we need. The rest of it we don't. I'm going to go ahead and invert my selection. Okay, so this is not my original data. This is just this little jig, and I'm going to delete that. Reason being is now we have a lot less triangles on the scene. The software is going to run better. The computer is going to struggle less, and that's really all we need from that piece. Then I'm going to, and I'll tell you that the plan on this patient is to establish an occlusal plane that aligns the teeth here in the back to this here in the front. Okay. And if you look, this patient is not aligned to the plane, so we'll go ahead and align it. In the end, I'll base this model, or I should say I would recommend you base this model, but we're not going to at this point. We've already learned how to do that. Right now, I just want to focus on the wax up part. So right now, you can see that tooth and the front are aligned. And then if we come over on this side, we can see that's pretty dang close, but it's a little bit tilted. And obviously, the more information you gather, the easier that this step is going to be for you. So I'm looking at those molars and this here in the anterior, and that's pretty dang close. Okay, so we'll hit accept there. And on this patient, we are maintaining that midline, but we can take this piece and hide it, and now we just have these ones. Okay, we do want this jig as our reference, but for now I'm going to turn this one off and just have this one on. So what I want to show you in this setup is if we go into the Brennus Pontics and scroll all the way to the bottom, notice there's a full setup in here. And so we're going to drag that in, and it has to think a little bit. Did it again. course, when you're on video, it happens more. I normally have that happen every now and then, and we've already seen it happen numerous times. There we go. All right, so the reason I got rid of the mandibular arch is because it's just more that would be in my way. So I'm looking right here at this midline. Let me align this way. So I'm looking, let me move this out of the way for a second and see how well I'm aligned to this grid. So here's my midline, my anterior teeth, my laterals. You can see that it actually doesn't follow the grid that well. You know, like this molar here versus this molar here. So maybe what would make sense would be to hit accept, to accept that, and to turn these on, okay? But if I want to see all that stuff, I want to grab a shader on this guy. And that way, when I'm doing my alignments, I can see the maxillary teeth, but everything's moving. So I'm looking at the lingual of those molars, first molars, and then I'm looking up through here. That actually looks pretty good, pretty good. Let's hit accept, and then this one right here, we'll put that shader back on it. But then we'll hide that, and then we'll go back to this T for transform. And now we know that this is aligned pretty well to the grid. And after all that, what would be easier is if I turn these back on. This time I don't need, oh, sorry, I gotta hit accept on that because I already started to transform it. I'm going to align my midline to that grid just to make it a little bit easier. Hit cancel, and I'm going to make that one see through. Now I can see a little better. All right, let's align our midline right there on the line so it's easy to see. But then that one hide, this one hide, back to this, back to this. Okay. So now we've got this aligned. So now I can put this where my two anterior teeth are lined up, and I can see how well it follows the arch, and it's following it pretty well, meaning the distance from this buccal surface to this buccal surface and this one to this one are pretty much the same. So if I pull this up into here, I don't necessarily need to twist or turn anything, but we can see that the further back we get, the teeth are getting smaller, but here in the anterior, they're pretty appropriately sized. And so instead of scaling everything, we'll probably just scale as we go, as needed, okay? Because obviously these ones need to be scaled. We don't want to scale all of them or else this is getting out of hand. And then, if you remember, we had positioned this on the occlusal plane, and we had chosen that as our incisal edge position, and that we wanted the teeth to align to the plane. So that is doing that pretty well. On this side, the buccal cusps are touching, and on this side, they're not. But the anteriors, if I brought this side down, I think it would be off, because already something looks a little off. So I'm just going to hit accept. And then I am going to show you. So if you notice this here in the anterior, everything is pretty well aligned, but the further back we get, we're not seeing. So essentially the patient has a wider arch than our setup. And so with something like that, I can come in here and I can choose certain teeth And normally I just click, click, click on all the teeth that I want to move. And this one, I think we can also move. All right, I'm going to hit E, which is going to expand. That G would have worked too because they're all the same color, but just because sometimes face groups change in this process, it's safer to just always hit E. And then I'm going to hit T. And so notice that even though these are all one STL file, if I select just some of them and then turn on my transform tool, I can, I'm just going to hit this so it centers it out. I'm clicking down on my scroll wheel and bringing this in. And I am going to tilt this out a little bit, other way. This is taxing on the system. I'm looking for a point where if I were to drag that canine out to the facial, that it gives me something better. I'm going to do something here with you that will really help, especially if you've got a system that, like if your computer's struggling, this will help. And it comes down to one of the very first lectures in this series, and it was about triangles, okay? When there's a lot of triangles on the scene, things get sluggish because every time you move something, it has to move all those triangles. And if you look, like if I were to turn back on my opposing, and you look and you compare the triangles between the teeth and the models, notice how tiny these are. Now these are tiny too, but we kind of don't want to mess with them too much. If you really had to, you could come throughout here and maybe select way up in here and reduce those, but the easy option is to take these, okay? I'm going to just hide these for a second, so we're just looking at these, and I'm going to hit Control A. And I might have to fast forward through this step because it might take a while. But I'm going to hit Control A, which is going to select all the teeth. Then I'm going to go in and hit Shift R. If you hit R accidentally, you're going to be in trouble because you're now taking something that has very small triangles and trying to make them even smaller. And it's going to take forever for your system. And you might as well just close out of Mesh Mixer and go back in. But if you hold down Shift R, that is the shortcut for reduce. And I could have just shown you where to find that in the menu. I'll try to remember to do that again. But what reduce is going to do for you is it's going to run through this a lot faster, because now it's taking the triangles and making, like combining current triangles, and it's a lot less math to do that than the opposite. Okay, and see how it keeps going through that bar? Every time it goes completely through the bar, it is finished one tooth. And so if you were to count how many times the bar went across, that's how many teeth we have on the scene. So it's actually moving along pretty quick. So I don't know if I'll need to fast forward anything. Notice when it first comes out of this, the proposal it's going to give us, my guess, isn't going to be quite what we want. And we want to actually reduce it more than what it's. So right here, I would probably jump at least to 75%. So I'm going to hit enter. And again, it's going to go back through each and every tooth. But notice it didn't really change much when it first came on. But we want to go through and try it again. And what this is going to do is it's going to make it so that you can manipulate things much faster. And if you really want to reduce it down quite a bit, you can make those triangles pretty big and still be able to figure out some diagnostics on it. We're not going to have to go very far before we're comfortable with it. Meaning, you know, having a decent number of triangles. I don't remember if it updates this until we hit accept, but right now our triangles are hovering almost around 2 million triangles. And 2 million is a lot for triangles. So notice right here that the triangles still are pretty big. So I'm actually going to go with this and crank it all the way to 95. Let's go 90. Hit enter. If I have like one tooth I'm doing this to, normally I'll click somewhere on the percentage line instead of typing it in like that. But with this particular tool, like tools like what are they, Hollow and Make Solid, you can change the settings and it won't update till you click an update button. But with ones like this, I kind of wish that they also had an update button where you could mess around with your settings and then hit update, because every time you change a setting, it starts to update. And so with these, if I click somewhere and I was like, oh, that's not where I wanted to click, I gotta wait for it to run through the whole process. So sometimes it's easier to just type in a number on the tools that do that. I haven't been counting to see, but I know it's been going for a while, so I'm guessing we're almost there. And then we'll see. That is something I'm much happier with. So I'm going to go ahead and hit accept. And I'm curious to see what this number down here turns to once we hit accept, because like I said, it's about 2 million right now. And I'd rather not mess around too much with our model. But if we were to want to reduce it, see, it dropped all the way down to almost 200,000. So it went from 2 million to 200,000. And yet, if you notice, if we clear this selection and we turn off the wireframes, it's not bad. Like, those are still pretty decent teeth to be working with. And if you look at a comparison now between them, you can see that now our model is the heavy one and that these aren't too bad. So for some reason, these ones, if you were, I know I said I wasn't going to do this, but if you were to mess around with this, what I would probably recommend doing is kind of hide this, get out the one that you're going to mess around with, and I would probably go under select and use the lasso and just draw right around. Nice thing about the lasso is you can rotate your model and continue to go around selecting it. And if you notice, I'm just staying down away from the important information. I mean, this is the gingiva. This is where we aren't worried. Okay. Always stop where you leave off rather than doing what I just did. And once it comes close, it'll go like that. I'm realizing that I could have come a lot closer to the teeth on this side than I did. Normally it highlights those a lot faster. This is not going the way I planned. All right, let's do this instead. Normally when you use the lasso, when it connects on the other side, it will select. It'll select an area. But maybe because there's so many triangles, it was struggling with that. So we're going to do this instead. I'm going to come along. I'm not going to worry about smoothing anything. But I am going to turn this into a face group, and that's Control G. If you want to do that, I'll show you. Control G is the shortcut. If you wanted to do it in here, it's right here, create a face group. And the reason I did that is because then I can double click out here and it selects the rest. Okay, so if you remember from turning on our wireframes, all of this information up in here, here, you gotta watch me. Sometimes I spend time doing things that other people just don't want to spend time doing. I do know though that if you do this, your system is going to run a lot better than if you left it how it was. What I would have done rather than how I'm doing this now is right from the beginning when I was doing my selection, I would have gotten up in between the teeth like this. I guess after seeing it, I thought, you know, I can totally reduce more of those triangles and have it run even better. Alrighty, so again, this time I'll show you where it is. Reduce, Shift R is the backup, and we're going to do the same. We're going to put this at 90%. This time there's just one STL file, so we're not going to have to see the bar go back and forth over and over and over again. But we know right here we're going to click 90 and hit enter. And this tool runs pretty quick in comparison. The remesh on something with a lot of triangles is very, very slow. Okay, I'm going to turn on the wireframes and see if we're happy. Okay, where'd that go? Wireframes. So that's probably more aggressive than I really intended. I'm going to drop it to 80 and we'll see if we're happy with that. I was noticing before I turned on the wireframes that everything looked a little too blocky, and that's what led me to think, maybe this isn't quite what I want. And so you can see these triangles. I'm going to leave them here, but those triangles are kind of big. Okay, we'll go ahead. Oh, you know what? I think one reason that I'm not happy is it's trying to preserve some of these edges here. I'm going to hop back into the tool. I just did Control Z to undo. Because I had made those, that one band that went across. Oh, I didn't even have that checked. Never mind. All right, let's just hit accept. All right, so we're going to leave this alone, but you can see we're all the way down. Clear selection. I didn't take note of how many triangles I had before, unfortunately. I was going to tell you what we're down to, but we didn't take stock. But already you're going to notice as we move forward that things are going to move a lot faster. And so we're going to go ahead and hide this again. Hide this one, not that one, this one, this one. And we're back to where we started. But this time it should allow us to do this a lot faster. So we're going to click, click, click. Notice how much faster things are working. So that's the solution if you ever run into a problem where the system is so slow and sluggish. It's because the triangle count is just enormous. All right, so this is following pretty well. It's just that the teeth themselves aren't quite the right size. This one's not too bad, but maybe it could be a little bit bigger. I'm actually going to hit T again, and I'm going to transform a little bit and pull back so that that canine does line up. And I'm going to hit accept, and I'm going to hit S. This time I'm just going to grab these ones and then transform, and I'm going to grow these out a little bit and pull them back. And so you can see that if I, oh, you know what? I didn't do this one. Left one of them out. Alrighty. And eventually I'm going to go individually to all these teeth, but right now I'm just taking advantage of the fact that they're together. Like I can easily just select certain ones. I can also do like this. Oops. I clicked outside of Mesh Mixer, down on my screen below, and then E, transform. Also notice that I click on the little arc, the pizza crust, but then I move far away to make those fine rotational movements. T. T again. This time I'm putting it right in the center from the distal of this molar to the meso there. And that way I can just grow until it looks like it's filling that space nicely. And then I'll hit accept. All right. So now we're pretty well where we want to be size-wise with the teeth. Okay. And so at this point, I am going to, make my object browser a lot larger. And I'm going to go ahead and go into edit and do separate shells. So that's going to take each of my teeth and it's going to make it into individual teeth. So now I've got them all individual. Okay. And I am going to start fine tuning. And normally what I would do is start here in the anterior and work my way out. These ones, and again, hovering my pinky over my A and my index over the T. That way I can click on a tooth and I can move it, hit A. So we've got T. Make sure that that's where I want it. A, T. And again, C to change the point of rotation. And it's not rotating along the plane I want it to, but to change that plane by using the pivots, especially on a wide scale like this, would take a lot of time. And so normally I don't take that time, I just make it work. Because like right now, you can see that I want to turn this way, but I can't. So I have to turn it one way and then another. And so that's what I do. This is not turning it buccolingually. It kind of turns it off to the side a little bit, so I have to come in and turn it again. But to me, that's quicker than assigning a pivot, changing the rotation of that pivot, and then every time I go to do a setup, or sorry, every time I go to move a tooth, I have to first click the transform button, and then I have to go in and click on the pivot. So it's just another step, which is one of the things I just had to get over when I was early on in digital dentistry and I wanted to do these in-house wax-ups, and yet I did not have exocad. So I got good at Mesh Mixer. It was free. So that's just one of the things that you give up. All right, so as you can see, you can keep going with this. Not so sure I want to do the whole thing with you, just because that, for one, that gets very boring for you to keep watching me do an entire setup. You kind of get the idea on what I'm doing, but I want to show you another concept here, and I'm just going to get rid of that color there. The idea I want to show you is that if we turn back on our mandibular arch, okay, let's say that we set these teeth and we're happy with them, but let's say that we're looking at the teeth and we're looking at the patient and we're realizing that we need to change the vertical to make this possible. For one, the very first thing we notice with this patient is that we're not going to, here, let's do this. I'm going to take these teeth here in the maxillary arch and we're going to combine them again. So I'm holding down shift, I'm going to click on all of them, okay. I'm going to hit Y, which is the shortcut for combine, and then I'm going to take these, I'm going to hide them. And I want to see how far back we have to come to get these teeth where we want them to be. I'm thinking that what we're going to do is delete those and then take these ones right here and make them a little bigger, but then pull them back into this space, okay? I think there's just not, this patient is obviously a bit class 2, okay? No doubt about it. And so we do that, and then we can turn this one back on and the shells. So you can see how class 2 the patient is. But let's say we're still looking at the gingival margins here and the teeth, and we don't want those teeth to be so short. We want to change that vertical. I want to show you how to do that. So this one I don't have is included in the course because it's actually my son's file. And so if you want to use the file, you can pick it up from, so you drag it onto here, and let me just, and after we do this, we'll be done with the course, with this video for today. All right. Notice what I've done is I've just taken this and I've aligned it. Oops, got to align it both ways. So you can see that there's this little grid here in the front. So I kind of try to align that to the midline. The place eventually, in the near future, there's going to be a store at Digital DDS, and that's where the file is going to go. And so I would direct you to go to the store and purchase the STL of this there. But in the meantime, there is a video, or a video. So if I were to hop over to Digital DDS, give me a second. All right, so if you're on Digital DDS, there's a video here, and we'll say open, because it's opening the, changing the vertical. I didn't mean, let's just type in vertical, okay? When you type in vertical, you notice that there's this one that says changing vertical in Mesh Mixer plus the files you'll need, okay? Whereas there's this one here that says files not included. So this is showing how to do what I'm going to show you now, but it doesn't include the file. This one does. So until it gets into the shop, you're going to want to just look for that and purchase that. But going back over into here, the idea is pretty simple. And I use this to align, but then I don't need this anymore. So I normally click on this, G to expand, and I just delete it. And then this piece, I click on this, and I do like that I hit G to expand to the group, and then Y to separate it. So now you can see that these two pieces are separate from these two pieces. And you can click, hold down Shift, and essentially what you're doing is combining these, and that's like putting stone on your articulator to connect them together. And then, this is where the magic happens, you go into where it says Create Pivot. Normally for something like this, I use a bounding box and I click on it. What that does is it plops this right in the center of an imaginary box that includes the whole entire articulator. And I say drop the pivot, and then I can click on, if you notice over here, there's the pivot, and I can transform that pivot. And I can take that and I can just move it right in the center of where that is. So now you can see where that sits. That's my point of rotation. So now I can grab onto the lower part of this articulator and I can go to transform it, but I can change my point of rotation to where that pivot is. Okay, and so notice, and I'm going to bring it down this way so I can do some fine movements. I'm going to drag it way over here and see how I'm opening and closing the bite. And I'm kind of looking at where the teeth are, and I'm aligning my gingival margins a little bit off of that. Okay, so I can take this and I can see where the teeth are, and I'm probably going to look at that canine right there and choose where I want my vertical to be. I hit accept, and then after that, really all I would need to do is click on the lower model, expand to connected, and then do a Y to separate it. And now these two pieces, if you want to hang on to them for later, you can, since they're all aligned. I would probably just combine them together and then hide them so that they're just not there for now. Okay. Now that being said, technically, because I already did all that, if I went back and wanted to use the same exact rotation point, I can. Okay. So you don't really even have to keep the articulator in there if you don't need it visually, but it's up to you. Okay, so right now technically my model's changing, but the articulator is not. So yeah, so like I said, I'm not going to go through and set all of these teeth with you right now because I think that would bore you, but also notice right here, if you went into your sculpting tools, you can simulate crown lengthening. I'm going to turn my grid off. You could simulate crown lengthening. I'm going to use the drag tool by pulling the STLs up into here like this. And so if you really wanted to play around with that, you could. Okay. So you're just kind of dragging things here and there. Shift to smooth. Secondary brush. And if you compare that to, say, your original, you can even start to get a sense of how much crown lengthening is needed to get you where you wanted to be. But really at this point, you just start moving teeth around just like you would in wax and try to work on it. The nice thing about a digital setup is you can easily take an entire tooth and just move it. You know, if you're doing it in wax and you wax it up and you realize, shoot, I gotta move the whole tooth over a millimeter, you're hurting pretty bad because waxing it over a millimeter is a lot of work. In here, it's very, very easy to do. And you'll notice that it's just he's gonna have this overbite. I'd probably close the vertical some more because that seemed like a big gap to close. But you just keep messing around with it, and then when you're done, you add a base, save it out, combine everything together, and save it out as an STL file, so you're ready to print. So if you have any questions, please do reach out either in the comments below or message me on Facebook, Instagram, and we'll try to get you up to speed with all this. Thanks for joining me today.